Hello and welcome to the Family History Show by Findmypast. We've got a very exciting session here today, something a little bit different to what we're used to. A bit of a crossover episode as well. You'll be used to seeing me on the Family History Show, Jen on the Family History Expert Hour. So we've brought the two best hosts of each side of the Friday Live programme together for one big crossover episode that will go down as one of the greatest, I'm sure. But please welcome from the Family History Expert Hour, Jen Baldwin. How are you doing, Jen?
I'm fab, Liam. Thank you. That was probably the best introduction ever. Yeah, I think you're right. I think this will go down in history, actually.
I was trying to think of like famous crossover episodes to compare this to, but I couldn't really think of was there a Friends one?
I don't watch TV, Liam. You know this about me.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea.
I'm so used to doing them with Ellie, who knows like every TV program going. So I'm just like, if Ellie was in the comments, she would let us know. But Ellie is on holiday. No one is in the comments, but I will be keeping an eye. So behave yourselves and watch along. No question of the week today, but we are doing a bit of a Q&A with Jen today. So we're doing about her story in family history, how she got started with the hobby, and also how she turned a hobby into a career and started working for the lovely Findmypast and ended up on Facebook Live with a guy from Dundee on Friday afternoon in July 2025. What a journey it's been. So we're going to hear all about that. If you do have any questions for Jen about working in family history, how you can get started being a professional genealogist or anything at all, anything about Jen's job, about working for Findmypast, anything we can help with that you think you might have for Jen, pop it in the comments. We do have some pre-submitted ones as well from our friends on the Family History Forum by Findmypast, which I am frantically trying to get a post up there as I go live as well. This is why you need someone in the comments, just to let our friends on the Family History Forum know. So Jen, if you want to spitball for a little minute whilst I do this typing, and then we can get started.
I'm happy to. First, we have to talk about the weather because that's how we start every conversation, I believe, in the world. Liam and I were just talking about this. So I'm seeing a lot of people across the UK chiming in on their comments, and it sounds like it's very hot. And I am very sorry for all of you because I know that your heat comes with humidity. It's supposed to be 95 degrees Fahrenheit at my house today, which is 35 Celsius. Our high this week, what did I say? 40 Celsius earlier this week. And I thought I was going to die. And my heat is very different than all of your heat. I understand that. I also have aircon and a basement I can escape to and like all of these things, but it does not seem to matter. Heat is heat. And I don't know. I'm a redhead. Liam, you and I are redheads. And we were just saying you can't, you look forward to summer all year long and then you can't actually ever go outside, because if I went outside in that weather, I would just be immediately burnt and crispy and feel miserable. So, that's our weather report for the day, I think.
Yeah, I would just like to give a shout out to all my fellow hay fever sufferers as well, because as well as getting sunburn, I'm just not designed for this climate. Step outside, I can smell fresh cut grass. I know I'm going to be sniffing the next day. I'm a little bit blocked up now, so if I turn my camera or microphone off at any short notice, I'm just sneezing my head off. Nothing to worry about. But
I think Susan has it right here, laying on the bedroom floor in front of a fan with the cat. That's right, Susan. Susan, we applaud you and we encourage you to take your laptop or your phone, whatever you're watching us on, and go do that go be with the cat. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I love hearing about where people watch from. I remember when someone had tuned in on a bus home from London or something like that. It was.
Yeah, and I think we've had
strange stories.
We've had people from trains and we've had people from airplanes.
Airplanes,
I know I've watched from an airplane.
That's good. That's commitment.
Yeah. Yes.
You're a real fan, Jen. You're a real fan.
I had to know what was going on.
You just missed work so much. You had to see what me and Ellie were up to on our Friday afternoon.
No, that was a couple years. I think it might have been. Yeah, I don't know. That was a while ago. But yeah, I was on a plane. I have definitely watched from a plane. I don't think I'm the only one though. I think there was someone else.
Well, anyway. I'll be on holiday when you do your next session, so now I feel obligated to tune in from somewhere crazy now.
Now you have to.
Yes. Perfect. So as the description, as the introduction said, we are going to hear a little bit more from Jen. Jen has been on your screens for 6 years, 5-6 years or something.
So I don't know, a long time.
A long time since Jen's joined the Family History. I was going to say Family History Show Friday Live. I suppose it would have been Findmypast Fridays. It would have been called at the time. So you'll have seen Jen on screen for a long time. You'll be familiar with Jen's work through the Findmypast blog, through when we're in the newspapers for doing great research. A lot of that comes from Jen, if not all of it. So we will be hearing more about how she got to that point, and as the title of the session says, how she turned a hobby into a profession. So going all the way back to the start, first of all, Jen, how did you first become interested in family history? How was it a hobby to begin with for you?
Honestly, I think this is one of my favorite questions ever. I love talking about this because it brings back so many good memories. So in the US, it's very customary for elementary school children to do some kind of a report or a project on their family history. And it's kind of disguised, that's not even a word, disguised in like this concept of making connections with the eldest members of your family. So usually it goes along something of the lines of go have a conversation with this like basically interview guide and talk to someone who is older than you in your family. So I'm the youngest of 4. And so all of my grandparents had already been picked up on my siblings. And my teacher looks at me and says, you can't do any of the same grandparents that your siblings have done. So I only had one option, but that was okay because I was very happy with it. My grandpa, who's close to my dad's dad, they lived about a mile away. So we saw them all the time. And what I didn't realize at the time when I sat down, I think I was like 10, I sat down to have this conversation with him. Grandma sat down with us. My grandfather had already been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so his condition was like, he was in that stage where he was like, sometimes he was really with it and he was just grandpa and sometimes he wasn't. So grandma sat with us and she made sure that the answers were correct. But at some point, she must have seen something in me because she started suddenly inviting me to go with her to go visit random family members that I'd never heard of before. And all of a sudden we were going to cemeteries. And on the last day of school, she would always pick us all up and we'd go do some special like activity with grandma. And that year we went on a train, which was like one of my absolute favorite things. And it still is. And she took us to go visit this family that like I literally had never heard of these people. I had no idea. And I finally figured out they were my dad's cousins. So that grandma just saw something and she just kept it going. So suddenly at Easter dinner or the Thanksgiving dinner table, right, and the whole family is all together, instead of being shunted down to the kids' table, I was sitting next to grandma and grandpa up at the head of the table between my dad and his brother, just listening to all these stories. And that like my parents were like, don't you want to go? And I was like, no, this is awesome. I love this. So she never once like sat me down with a pedigree chart or like, wrote, like, it wasn't that. It was all oral history and just being surrounded by family and just hearing all this. And it wasn't until after she died that we found the pedigree charts in her house and like, all the letters that she had written to distant people and like, do you remember the name of so-and-so? And like all of that. And I was like, gimme. So, so I kind of started as a child. I didn't really have that kind of traditional model, but she took me to archives and libraries and all sorts of things. And then after college, when I finished university, it took me a while to find a job. And my dad in the meantime was like, hey, can you help me find these things? We found these letters in your grandma's house because she had just recently passed away. And I don't know who they're from or why she owned them. And it turns out they were letters that dated back to the US Civil War. And They were some of our ancestors. So they were our great uncles and aunts that were writing back and forth. And that was when the internet was really new and my dad didn't really know what to do. And so I spent some time on that and I was just hooked. I've just been hooked ever since. And I don't want to admit how long ago university was, but so my birthday's coming up actually. So I've been doing this since I was 10. So roughly 37 years ish.
Wow.
If you take into consideration all the childhood years and everything, I think that's the number.
Yeah. And that is, I know on the Family History Forum, for example, we quite often ask like how people got started in family history. And I'm not just saying this because I know you and we're live today, but that is the best origin story I think I've heard. That is so good, especially the way you told
rehearsed,
it.
Actually.
Yeah, you weren't meant to say that, Jen. This is the first time you're hearing these questions.
Oh, no. I've been getting that. I mean, we all get that question, but that's true. I've been getting that question for a decade, right? So,
yeah.
But obviously I love my grandmother, and she was really special to me. So I really enjoy talking about that story. So that's good.
Yeah, and it's really special that she was the one that kind of got you started on it, and then she was become this thing for you.
And she was a very stern woman. She was a descendant of German immigrants, and the child of German immigrants, and so she was very like, she was not the cozy, comfy grandma, right? But when I went to her house to hear these stories, I got fresh baked cookies. And so my siblings were all like, "You're crazy! Like, why are you spending so much time with grandma and grandpa?" Like, because they put me to work. Like, they were on the dairy farm, so like, I would go do chores, and then grandma would be like, "Okay, that's enough. Come on in for a snack." And I would get all these fresh cookies, and me and grandma and grandpa would sit down and shoot. They would just pour these stories out, and I was like, it was worth every ounce of effort to get the cookies and the stories. Like, to me, my siblings were nuts that they didn't volunteer for this. I thought they were crazy.
Fresh baked cookies is always, we went live, we were speaking about like US TV shows and things like Basements. Fresh baked cookies from grandma also feels like a very American thing to me. Like,
yeah, I think it's very like stereotypical, right? But like, my grandma never did that. I mean, she did, but like, she wasn't that like, "Oh, come here, dear, let me tell you a story and like save you from your parent." Like, there was no spoil. She didn't spoil us at all. As a grandmother, right? So, yeah, she was very. I think she probably disciplined us more than our own parents did.
So you said there that, so you got started very early, you kind of kept it going, you did university. That wasn't genealogy related then?
It wasn't, not at all.
And so then you were looking for a job. So at what point, you obviously had this hobby for many years, you were finished university, you were looking for a job. So at what point did you think, maybe this is what my job should be?
So I spent several years in hotels and resorts, actually. I worked for over 10 years for Marriott International, and really enjoyed that. And it wasn't until I was at home with our daughter that I started to kind of get bored, right? Like, I mean, we don't get as much maternity leave, but we were just in a financial situation where I ended up staying home with her full time for the first couple of years, which was a real blessing. And at one point, my husband looked at me and he just goes, "You're really bored. Like, you're really bored. Can you please do something like mentally? Because you're not, stimulating yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I went back to genealogy. And by then, of course, internet genealogy had just like completely changed and exploded. And that's when I first cued into like, wait, people make money at this? Like, what? So I was like, well, what does it take? Like, how could I do that? Like, maybe I could do both, right? Maybe it could be a stay-at-home mom and like do some of this. This would be really cool. So that's when I started really kind of turning towards this as a career. I went to my first national conference. I think that was the turning point, really. It was the National Genealogical Society conference. I don't remember what year it was, but it was in Las Vegas, so it was quite close. And I went and I introduced myself to as many people as I could. I decided that I was going to be an official blogger for the conference, which is like a volunteer thing that you would sign up for to like help promote the event. And they got free media and you got certain perks, right? Like, so I got a free pass to the conference, for example. And I interviewed as many people as possible. And I made a lot of connections. And I went in with two real objectives in mind. The first was to promote a project that I was working on with some collaborators, a digital magazine. And then the second was to expand my network to be as large as humanly possible, especially with like the key leaders in the genealogy world at the time, right? The big speakers, the people that everybody thinks about when you think about genealogy. So, and obviously that was very US focused, but I met a lot of people. I got a lot of really good advice. And I realized at that point that I was actually chasing the wrong objectives. I was chasing something, like the dream, I think, for everybody is to kind of take on client work and like be able to do a lot of different research projects and then send your report off and get a check, right? And like get paid. But the reality is that there's already a lot of people doing that. And what I realized is that my local area was already pretty saturated with professional genealogists. So I needed to find a different route. So my first business venture in this space was actually running social media accounts on behalf of other professional genealogists. So you take, big speakers, and I managed their, their Facebook and their Twitter and their LinkedIn or whatever. I did that for a couple of years actually. And I didn't make a ton of money, but I met a lot of people, and I made some really important relationships. And as a result of that, that's how I started getting, I know some a gal in Colorado that's got this real interesting specialty, who could do a lecture on that. And I know someone who could do that piece of research. And I started getting introductions. And that's really how I got started in the field, I would say, is by networking my way in and kind of coming at the industry in a very different perspective, right? And seeing like, where's the gap and how can I fill it, instead of I just want to do research for people, which is the dream, right? Of course, that's what we all want to do. But in some cases, it's not realistic, right? And so I just found a different road. I think the best piece of advice I ever got, and this kind of fits well in this story and probably segues to another question, but the best piece of advice I ever got was to find your niche and own it. So in this industry, there's a lot of people who I do US research. I do UK research. I do Irish research. Okay, but what part of that research do you do? So when I started kind of scoping out my interests, my skill levels, and my competitors in the space that I was in, I realized that my passion areas were really in kind of those nuanced, very niche, subjects. This will shock you, Liam. Me doing niche research? That's crazy. What? So I really carved out a reputation based on two different areas of research. And the first was in fraternal organizations, with Oddfellows and Masons. And in the US, that's a very different thing than it is in the UK, socially and culturally. So that was a whole arena of research for me. At one point, there was over 2,000 of those organizations existing in the United States. So it's a much bigger part of our culture, historically. And then the second niche area I found was the mining culture. So especially in the Western US, but mining camps and the gold rushes and the silver rush and all of that. And they align with each other very well. So I kind of gained an expertise and gained a reputation in those areas. And from there, I was kind of able to network into client research and all the rest.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that about finding your niche, because like you say, I think with something like family history, like you say, you think, if I want a client, I need to know everything there is to know about the UK kind of thing. But then when you're watching Who Do You Think You Are or something like that, the experts that they're bringing in aren't British genealogy experts. They know about British migration to India in the 18th century. And that's why they're on the show, because they know everything about that. So like you say, it's finding, you might not get as much work necessarily, but the niche work, like you say, is you become an expert in that, don't you?
Yeah. And it's, it's so much about who you know, especially in an industry like this, right? The word of mouth is incredibly important. So if you are known because you do, I don't know, canal research, right? Then anybody who ever has a question about canal research is going to come to you. And that first question might just be a simple courtesy, but the second one or the third one that takes 3 hours, that comes with a fee, right? So now there's a consultation fee involved. So you have to think about, if you really want to turn your hobby into profession, you need to think about a variety of different sources of income, because a lot of people do client work, right? Tons of people do client work. How is your client work special, and how does it differ from anybody else's?
Yeah, and like you say, I think that's something that I think a lot of the advice that you're giving probably does apply to multiple industries, like
of course,
freelance sort of beginnings and all that kind of thing. So it is good advice for anyone out there who is just looking generally about turning hobbies into professions as well. So it's interesting. So you kind of touched upon it there about like client research. So would it be fair to say that most sort of professional genealogists would be those sort of freelance client-based researchers?
Yeah, I think by and large in the genealogy industry, that's pretty much what it is. There are very few companies that hire genealogists. And even like Ancestry for a while had a pretty big group of professional genealogists, and they've downsized in the last few years. So even those opportunities are fairly limited. There are other like archives and libraries and historical organizations. You might find some work with those. And I think it's important to really be open-minded. Like at one point, very early on, I got a case from a mining company who wanted me to research the history of this piece of land they were interested in because they wanted to acquire it so that they could mine on it. But I took the job because I was like, yeah, I can do that. I can trace this land all the way back to when the first, European people showed up on this property and decided to claim the land. So like, yes, I can do that. So I think there is a lot of opportunity out there if you are willing to kind of broaden your scope a little bit and be a little bit more open-minded about the type of work that you're going to do. When it comes to actually working in the field and making, a reliable, steady income, I think it's really difficult because you're essentially being an entrepreneur, right? You're starting your own business. And so you have to think about all of those things. You have to think about your finances and your marketing and your branding. And then on top of that, you also have to keep your skills honed and be able to do the research that you're selling and telling people you could do. So there's a lot to running your own business. It's one of the reasons why I took a job with Findmypast, because I realized I didn't want to run my own business. I didn't like all of that other stuff. So, the opportunity that came up with F&P was fantastic for me because it meant that I could just kind of like forget all of that and not have to deal with it anymore. But if that's the kind of person that you are, then by all means, jump in, but know what you're jumping into, right? Do that competitor analysis, understand what the landscape is in your regional area so that you know how to set your prices. It actually reminds me of a couple of years ago, I was reaching out to some people on behalf of Findmypast, trying to outsource some research in the UK. Because obviously I'm in the States, and so it's hard for me to get to the Birmingham Library, for example, on a whim. So I was trying to make some connections across the UK to site, and I kept asking this particular woman, like, what's your rate? How much are you going to charge me per hour? And she kept asking me, what do you think I should charge you? And that's not how this works. I can't develop your business plan for you. You need to do that and then come back to me and let me know where you're at, because I will hire you. I would like to use your skills, but I have to know what that's going to be. I mean, you don't call a plumber and just go like, hey, and the plumber never says, what do you think I should charge you for this job on your kitchen sink? That's not how this works. So we really have to take it as, it is running a small business. And I think people, a lot of people who are getting started or maybe thinking about, how do I get into that? That sounds really cool. I would like to do that. They don't really take the time to sit and think about what it means to run a small business. And so we need to kind of separate ourselves from I really want to do genealogy, but wait a second, I'm actually being an entrepreneur right now, and I got to figure that out.
Yeah. It's like what you're saying there. One of my friends is a freelance graphic designer. And there's a couple things that he says that resonate. There's he always says there's a quote. It's I didn't want a 9-to-5, so I started my own business, and now I work 24/7. He's like, I can't just close my laptop at 5 o'clock because I've got a client call with someone in New York, so I have to be on my laptop at 11 p.m. tonight, and then the next one's in Belgium tomorrow, so I'm up at 7 o'clock and things like that. And also what you're saying, especially genealogy and graphic design, like you're saying, the budget, he says that 90% of the conversations he has with clients are just a back and forth between him asking what their budget is and them asking him what his rate is. And he says that 90% conversations are just back and forth. What's your rate? Well, I don't know. What's your budget? So like you say, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just building fun family trees. Like you say, there's the marketing, the financial side of things. You got
to think about all of that.
Yeah. So as someone who's done both sides, and you've done the client work, and now you've been with Findmypast for
11 years.
11 years. So having done both sides for probably similar amount of time-ish, or?
Yeah, I don't take very many clients anymore. I will upon occasion, as a friend to a colleague, or if the project is particularly interesting. But probably if you add in the years before I started at Findmypast, probably about 11, 12 years.
Okay. Yeah. So then What do you think the main difference is? Because as we're saying, when I think of a professional genealogist, I still, even though I work in genealogy and I work with you, I still think of a freelance for
Yeah,
hire
I do.
genealogist.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
I was
What's
just
the
going to say,
full
so what's the
question?
kind of so what are the kind of differences between being that, other than like you're saying the running your own business side of things, in terms of the family history itself, between the researcher for hire and an in-house Findmypast
like
research
corporate
specialist?
researcher.
Yeah.
So I think I think probably the main difference actually is the amount of time you spend on a project, right? So I have friends in the industry who have spent 10 years working with one client on a specific part of their family. Or you can take something and just do like, I'm going to do 8 hours on this and the client is happy and they walk away. But even so, you're spending probably at least 8 to 12 hours on a project. And it's probably pedigree based, right? So it's probably very focused on, I am trying to figure out who my third great grandfather is, and I just cannot make any progress, and I just need some help to get this. Or it's, I really want to know what the town of origin was for my immigrant ancestors from Ireland. Where in Ireland did they actually from? Right? That's
question.
Everybody's question. Right? So it's probably very specific, and it should be, right? As a client, as kind of a freelance researcher, you need it to be specific, because otherwise they're going off in all these random directions, and the client comes back and they're like, I'm not paying you for any of this work. Like, this, you didn't answer my question. This isn't what I wanted. So it's got to be very kind of precise and defined. In my job for Findmypast, I might spend 2 hours on a project and then pass it off to the team that needs it. I could spend a month, and I've done that before, right? When we partnered with National Trust, I spent many weeks on those properties, researching those families really heavily. When we launched the 1921 census, we did our event with Heritage Open Days at the Savoy in London. I spent weeks preparing for that particular day. But in most cases, what I'm doing for the social media team or the PR team or a partnership or, I don't know, a blog post can be done in a week or less. And that's on top of all of, checking emails and Slack and going to meetings and like all that stuff. So I probably average 4 to 6 hours per project, but then I pass it off. And I do a lot of, but I don't want to use, it's not necessarily repetitive, but I do a lot of the same work along the same themes, right? So, this is the second year in a row we've done our Her Story campaign. Women's history is incredibly important, but it's 2 years in a row where, I've kind of sat and done, here's the basics of women's history. Here are some really cool stories about women that haven't really been talked about very much. Here are some women that were impacted. Like, it's kind of, it's more formulaic, I suppose, because we need certain elements for those campaigns. So I think probably this is a good place to actually talk about what it is that I actually do, because I think we say research specialists and genealogists around Findmypast, but nobody outside maybe knows what that actually is. So, where do I start this? So my job essentially is to do research on behalf of the brand team and the marketing teams for them to be able to tell stories. So I take our records at Findmypast and our newspaper clippings and all of the wonderful resources that we have, and I cultivate and find stories for the social media to post on Facebook. I don't do them all, right? Lots of people help and support that. Liam does a lot of his own research. Ellie helps with research. So there's lots of people building into that. But when it comes to like our bigger projects and our bigger campaigns, like when we did a campaign around VE Day, right? And Her Story, and we always do something around remembrance. Like I'm the one who sits at my desk and does all of the research to be able to tell those stories. And then that research actually gets divided up into a very, number of different things, right? So the email team might take one little sentence and turn it into an entire email campaign. The press team is going to take, somebody's story and send that out to UK media. A lot of it goes on landing pages and blog posts and all the places where you see Findmypast kind of writing and sharing content. So when you think about how my job differs from the average professional genealogist doing freelance work, it's very different, right? I don't touch anything until I get a briefing document from somebody saying, this is exactly what we're looking for. We want, a soldier who had some kind of a tremendous experience, who survived World War I, who came home and then turned into a criminal. It's a very specific, exactly what criminal is a bad example, but
I was going to say, when's that story?
We haven't done that story, but it's very, very specific, and it's very catered to the commercial objective, right? So sometimes the commercial objective is just we want to showcase how good we are at British and Irish research. So we need a story that covers 3 countries in the UK, and we need it to cover, 7 different record categories. Go. Good luck. Let us know what you find. That's kind of, which is delightful in its own way, because I get to do a lot of playing around and exploring. And I get to delve into a lot of different topics, right? So I would say that I no longer really have, my specialty is probably, at this point, is probably a generalist UK researcher, but I emphasize social history, which means that and that's the part that really brings all these stories together, right? There's thousands of men who went off to fight World War I. Each one of them has a very different, very unique story, but what is that? And without understanding the social history in their lives and the context, you have no way of discerning Soldier 1 from Soldier 2.
Yeah.
That was a really long-winded, I just went off on multiple tangents there, so I have no idea if I actually answered the question.
Well, I was going to say, to bring it full circle, I think what kind of sums up the difference between the freelance and the in-house kind of things is what you said there about the research document, because like you say, usually someone would say, this is my family tree, this guy came from Ireland, where was it? Whereas you say, what we as the kind of brand marketing team are giving you for these campaigns. And this is where I'll always be impressed by the work you do in these campaigns, because like you say, people will say, the example you gave there, again, I really hope you do find the World War I's soldier that had a tremendous experience and came back and turned it into a criminal, because it sounds like a good one. So I'm going to hold you to that. But the briefing documents and what you're able to just almost pluck out of thin air, in my mind, is to just because if you said to me, there is Winston Churchill, can you go and do a bit of his family tree? Yeah, cool, I can do a little bit of that. If you said to me, I need a World War I soldier who was injured in battle and came back to the UK, got married, then he was a criminal, I would be like, what on earth? Where do I let me just plug keywords into a newspaper and see what comes up, because it's the only hope I've got. So like I say, I will always be impressed. And like you say, all the campaigns that you're mentioning there, the Her Story ones, I'm sure plenty of people here have seen the live sessions, read the blogs, the landing pages. We've got Remembrance, like you said, we've got VE Day, we've got VJ Day, we've got Christmas, everything that happens throughout the year. Jen is at the core of it, and like I say, what she's able to turn from those briefing documents, which can be vague at best, and you nail it more or less every time, is always impressive. Like I say, especially from someone with a very census BMD newspaper research head like myself, what you're able to pull out, and like I say, the social history, the context, the fan research.
Yes, they
See, I do listen. But yeah, it is. I think, like I say, I think that does just sum up, is if you think in your head about the 2 documents, the one the freelancer is being given and the brief that you're being given, I think, like you say, that kind of sums it up to me, I think, in terms of what you're actually doing at the end of it, I think. So
yeah, maybe my specialty is actually interpreting marketing people speak to genealogy people speak. Maybe that's
so you've got the best of both worlds, because you used to be the marketing person and now you're the marketing person, research person. So you can decode, so you can read between the lines and they see what the PR release actually means in layman's terms. So maybe that's your advantage, like you say, is translating marketing to genealogy. Yeah, a good skill to have, because like I say, everyone that's enjoyed any of our campaigns will agree, I'm sure. So we did have some audience questions, and one of them ties into something I was going to ask anyway, so we'll start with that one. because Kimberly, I've seen Kim in the comments. She is here every week, so I will definitely start with hers. And it's, as I say, something I was going to say, and you kind of touched on it already. But for Kimberly and for anyone watching who is maybe interested in making family history into their profession, what sort of advice would you give them? You mentioned about the networking tips there. That's obviously a big one. There's just so many events in family history that you can go to and start making those connections. Are there any courses, any specific networking events or tips that you would give them? Anything, any volunteering roles that might be worthwhile?
So probably a handful of things to say to this in terms of advice. So I will repeat the words of wisdom that I was given when I started, which is to find your niche and make sure that the world knows that you are the expert on that topic, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter. It could be, I don't know, it could be railroads from 1901 to 1903 in Devon. Like, just whatever the thing is that you are passionate about, make it your thing. Make sure that the market needs it. Like, do your research and understand that it's valid and it's relevant and that no one else is already on that. But whatever that passion point is, try to turn it into your niche and really make yourself put yourself out there. You cannot be afraid to talk about yourself, which I know can be culturally very different from my American point of view to most of our audience. But you have to at some point get over that and be able to speak boldly about yourself. So that's my first thing. Find your niche. My second thing would be to network and network hard. Spend a lot of time on that. And I would actually say at this juncture, if there is anybody that's watching that is thinking about doing this professionally and you need a network to start off with, then you need to be linking up with people like me. And I recommend LinkedIn for that, actually. So I would invite anybody on this call who's trying to do that. Just send me an invitation on LinkedIn and I will connect you to my network. Because again, the more people you know, the better off you will be, right? So I understand that your niche is, what did I just say? Railroads in Devon, 1901. So the next time someone comes to me and says, hey, I have this problem about 1902 in Devon, and I think it has a train in it. And I'll be like, I know exactly who to send you to. But that's how it works, right? And and so then the next time you have something, you say like, you know what? I have this thing that I can't quite figure out, but I think Jen would be really good at this. Let me just shove it at her really quick and see what she says. Because she might recommend another person. She might just take it on. Like, it's all word of mouth, right? A lot of it is word of mouth. The third thing, and you actually said it, Liam, is to volunteer. I would not know nearly amount of people. My network would not be big. I probably would not be in this position I'm in right now if I had not started volunteering with genealogy societies and organizations. You must spend time in the community. And probably the best way to do that is to volunteer. So whether that's your local family history society or a national organization like AGRA, or in the US, or NGS, or one of the others, you have got to get yourself out there. And I think that it's important for all of us. It's important for all of us to realize how much comes from family history societies and how valuable they are, and how important they could be for our education, but for also providing records and preserving records. But in terms of building that reputation and doing it quickly, that is one way that will, shoot you higher, probably up in those organizations that you really want to be. I very quickly found myself on board meetings and on boards for national organizations and national conferences I really probably shouldn't have been on just yet, right? But the need for volunteers is so intense that if you put your hand up there, someone is definitely going to go, right, we need you to do this. And it's just I think it is just part of the industry, to be honest. I don't think that many of us can get away with being successful in this industry and not volunteering. There are a handful, but those are the people who are like on television. And I don't think that really applies to very many people. So the fourth thing then is education. And that never stops, never, ever, ever stops. There are lots of programs out there that offer education, both from a historical standpoint and from a genealogy standpoint. And in my opinion, you need a balance of both. But you also, of course, need to learn how to manage a small business. So think about all of those different elements in terms of where your skill sets are. So I tend to take institute courses. It's my preferred way of learning, to be honest. An institute course is a week-long kind of intensive in a particular subject. So 2 years ago, I took a course on Scottish research, and I was literally engrossed in Scottish research for an entire week with Paul Milner, who's just an excellent genealogist. And it was a US based program, but of course that's where I am, so that makes sense. Last year I taught a course, and that was also an incredibly good learning experience for me, because pulling all of that information together in your head is one thing, putting it together in a slide show or on a on a handout is quite another. I will take a moment to make a pitch, because I am a trustee on an organization. Oh, weird! I still volunteer. So this year, actually, the International Society of British Genealogy and Family History, which is a real mouthful, is doing an online institute. It's online only, so you have the option of watching the sessions live, or just purchasing the recordings and watching the back at your own time. The institute will be in October. Oh, thank you, Liam. You shared our registration link. Yay. I appreciate you. It's actually pretty, like, it's taught by Paul Milner. Again, just like throwing his name out. He's one of the best. The course is on this year's course is actually on English research, and it is designed kind of as an intro and intermediate level course, but I think it's a good one. Just I've done it before. I've taken his course before. It's a really good established course in just like the fundamentals of English research, making sure that you've got all of your X's and Y's kind of covered. The education component is incredibly important. You see all these books behind me, and I refer to them on almost every live broadcast that I do. I really do read all of these, and journal articles as well. And I study them. And if you pulled one off a shelf, you'd probably find little post-it tabs and notes and all sorts of things. I read a ton. I listen to podcasts. I consume historic information as much as I can possibly handle. Sometimes I go overboard and I need to take a couple of days off and like give my brain a rest. So those are my 4 things. What did I say? Know your niche, network a lot, network like crazy, and put yourself out there. Volunteer, and your education. 4 essential components, I think, to any career in this industry.
Mm-hmm. We do have 2 more audience questions, so I don't want to jump on their toes too much, but just something that came to my head there, just out of a personal interest perspective. How important is like formal education in the industry of genealogy? Like, I know some industries, even if you're a freelancer or you're applying for a job, you'll need letters after your name to be able to get into the industry, sort of thing. So is there that in genealogy, or is it more of an experience-based thing? Or
I think it varies, and that's not a really good answer, but that's the truth. So my personal experience, I have a bachelor's. I do not have any fancy letters after my name. I'm not a certified genealogist in the United States. I'm not a member of AGRA in the UK. I may at some point in my future, in my career, do those things, but for now it hasn't mattered. I think what matters is some kind of formal education, whether it's in the field or not, right? If you can say, yeah, I've got, I've been to university, I know how to put a research project together, I know how to organize myself, I'm a professional person. I think that's more important. There are certainly people in the world who are going to go, oh, I only want a certified genealogist to do this. But I have seen plenty of examples of work performed or presented by certified genealogists that, in my opinion, just aren't quite as good as they could be. So do letters matter to some people? Yes, absolutely. But is it, in my opinion, that important? To be honest with you, no. I would hire someone based on their expertise and their niche and their persona over the fact that they have letters by their name, behind their name. There are programs that are out there that are incredibly good, right? So University of Strathclyde has an excellent genealogy program. And I've kind of pondered it for years, actually, going back there and trying to, take the next step. But I also have other priorities, right? I have a 16-year-old daughter at home. And so I'm just going to hang out with her for a couple of years until she's ready to live her own adult life. And then maybe I'll go back to school. So I think everybody's on their own journey. And there's a way to be a professional and be educated with or without the letters.
petition for your daughter to do university in Scotland, so you can also do 4 years at Strathclyde.
See, if she was interested in university, I would do that. Right now, that's not happening. Marching band, marching band.
We don't really have them in Scotland, unfortunately. So,
no, you don't. Yeah, that's
maybe
problematic.
not one show we want to join anyway. So what do we have? So we've got 2 audience questions there. There may still be time, so pop it in the comments if anything has come to you.
I can try to talk
there, but we will rattle through. We've got 15 minutes, but something else is going to pop into my mind and I'm going to derail us again. So we'll start with Terry. So Terry on the Findmypast forum asked, how long did it take to become a professional? So you kind of did touch on it there, and kind of interested in kind of how much work you got to begin with as well, and at what point did it become?
So gosh, I'm trying to go back through my memory banks at this point. So let me think about this. So when I first started as a professional genealogist and kind of this is probably an American expression, but I kind of put my shingle out that I was open for business. That's very American, isn't it? Yeah. Hopefully you know what I mean. I probably spent, let me think, gosh. I think I got my first client job after probably 4 or 5 months of like advertising myself. But in the interim, I had started writing for a local blog as a freelancer. I wrote their history column. Within the first year, I'd gotten a job with the local historical society, and actually a job, not a volunteer position, but they used me as a tour guide for their cemetery tours, which was so much freaking fun. Absolutely loved it. And then
was if you weren't working for Findmypast, what would you be doing? But I don't need to ask that anymore because that is
job, so. If I can make cemetery tours like a real full-time, like, you know, I could actually live off this career. Probably do that. So I started working for them, and then they were like, "Ooh, it's kind of nice having a genealogist on staff. We didn't really understand the value here." And so then I started like picking up other work with them. So that was great. I worked with them for a number of years. Like I said at the beginning, I did kind of the social media management. So that was actually the first place I really got my first true like long-term clients. I had 3 people that I did that for probably 3 years or so before I finally like said, okay, I can't really do this anymore. I've got too much going on. And by that time I'd started working for Findmypast. So my journey was very different because my first job with Findmypast was as a temporary contract hire, and that lasted for 6 months. But I got that within 2 years of saying to the world, I'm a professional genealogist. And that is not typical, right? Because there's not very many opportunities like that in the business. So I would say, probably expect it to take a good 5 to 6 months before you pick up your first real client job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that really varies. It's going to depend on your location and the economical situation of the environment you're in the moment. And like all those things, it might be very different today than it was, 12 years ago when I started doing this. 13 years ago, whatever.
Definitely. Yeah. And just to caveat that as well, I think important for anyone kind of looking to, especially if you are looking to kind of start your own business or kind of go freelance in a hobby, is like all the advice Jen is giving you here is great. And she's obviously a great example of someone who has made the transition. But I think from speaking to some of my friends, like the graphic designer I mentioned earlier, for example, don't get too bogged down in other people's journey sometimes, for example.
Totally.
He used to say that he would hear people who worked for an agency for a year and then went freelance and were full-time within 6 months or whatever it might be, kind of thing, whereas it took him maybe 2 years before he was kind of making a full-time wage during the freelance. So like I say, everyone's going to be different. So like I say, just to caveat that as well, if you are 3 years into your freelance journey, that's absolutely fine. Like you will get there. Kind of thing.
100%.
Where are we? Final question. This one is from Rosie, also on the Findmypast forum, or the Family History Forum by Findmypast. Rosie says, do you enjoy the travel involved in your work, and where has been your favorite genealogy related destination?
Oh my gosh. What a good question, Rosie. Okay, so pre-COVID, I traveled a lot more. Pre-COVID, Findmypast had me at basically every U.S. genealogy conference, all the national ones and some of the regional ones, and I was on the road a lot, like a third of the year. So I enjoyed that, but it is exhausting, and it's and I didn't like being away from my child that much. So life choices. Um, I'd say my problem, and that was almost entirely US, right? Almost entirely domestic. So my favorite US destination probably was the conference that we had in Michigan. And I think it was in Ann Arbor. And no, that's not right. Anyway, I met a colleague and a friend a week in advance, and we did a road trip from airport over to the conference across the state of Michigan. And he and I both had research to do along the way. And so we stopped at a number of different places, and I finally got to see the graves of my third great grandparents and like all of those things. So that was a very cool trip.
Mm-hmm.
Still probably, although the cemetery in Rhode Island was also very interesting, but for a completely different reason. From a UK perspective, so since COVID, my travel has been almost entirely UK, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go over 3 to 4 times a year on average. And I typically go to London and spend some time in our office on Fleet Street. I enjoy London. I think probably my favorite memory about London is actually going to see the parish where my ancestors left England from. Now, they left England in 1635 and went to Massachusetts. And a colleague had actually done a little bit of extra research, and he toured me around the whole area, and he showed me, steps down to the river that are still there, that were there when my ancestors lived there, and like the whole neighborhood. And then we went to a service at the parish, and afterwards got a chance to talk to the minister, and she showed us around and let me take all these pictures, and the baptismal font is still there that they would have used, and like it was all amazing, and I cried a lot, and it was great. From a research perspective, like outside of my own family, I think I need to spend more time in Scotland. I haven't been back to Scotland in a while, actually, so I need a good business excuse to get up there because I miss Scotland. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I have been now to Scotland, England, and Ireland. I still need to go to Wales, so I can kind of cut them all, check them all off the list. And technically, I need to go to Northern Ireland still. So those would be my goals in the coming future. I think from researching at TNA is an experience that's unlike anything else. Same with British Library. Like it's just, those are just very, very important and impressive institutions. But maybe one of my favorite moments was actually, where were we? Corey Bank in Style in Cheshire. I had to think about that. So one step at a time. They have a small archive there at the Corey Bank Mill, which is now part of the National Trust. And they toured me through it. I've been working with them for months, and they showed me a lot of their original documents. And so that was really a cool place to go as well. I think Style would be on my list.
Yeah, that was
places.
That was a good trip as well. It felt like when we were so used to traveling and going to like London, being in that tiny travel lodge in Style and walking down this like 50-meter long high street and going to like the only restaurant that was open, and like finding a pub that was open for a drink after the event and everything. Like, that was
a very
that
was a whole adventure in and of itself. And my colleagues laugh at me because when we're on the train or something somewhere, I'm like, rolling green hills, look at the sheep, oh my god, because I get very excited about seeing like what I think of as like real England instead of like just Fleet Street is very business and like, okay, it's London and it's whatever, and London's great, nothing against London, I have a lot of fun there, but like seeing how like normal people live, I think is still like really gets my blood pumping. I like that.
Well, you'll love the train from London to Dundee when you eventually
see. I need to do that. I really I want to do that so badly.
It ticks a lot of boxes. I think the problem would be keeping you on the train and not having you jump off at York to see, like jump off York, jump off Newcastle. Just want to go see everywhere.
Can I just do that anyway? That'd be great. Where'd Jen go? We don't know. We lost her somewhere in the countryside. There was sheep. I don't know.
We got off at York. We're now in Edinburgh. Who knows? But we should definitely get that. And like you say, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, you've got me, Ellie, Mary in each
I
location.
know,
Your three
I know.
favorite Find My Past employees.
That's
So
not a lie. That's not a lie.
in that order as well. Notice I said me, Ellie,
That's
Mary.
right.
Reverse or
Don't tell
1 to
Mary
3
we said
that was.
Yeah, I've said for a long time that I really actually would like to move over at some point in my life and like at least live there for a year or two or something. But I feel like I have to go to each country first to be able to decide where to go. So
well,
they all deserve my due attention, I feel like.
Free prescriptions, free higher education.
I know.
Just saying, we've got it good up north. when the decision comes, I'll put together a good brochure for
there you go.
Tayside, Scotland. Yes, so yeah, I think that just about look at that for timing as well. 3 minutes.
I know we did pretty good.
That was bang on. I thought there was a lot going on.
I mentioned earlier that if people want to start working on their network to connect with me, so I'm going to share actually my LinkedIn profile in the chat. If you send me an invitation to connect, and please do, I literally, like, I'm really serious about that. Just say something in your invite link about, when you have to, you can just like say more about why you want to connect with this person or whatever. Like, say something about this live broadcast, and then I'll know who you are and where you came from. But I'm going to do that now before we finish.
Sounds good. And yet the amount, going back to that LinkedIn, I meant to say at the time, genealogists are very good networkers because the amount of random researchers that have added me on LinkedIn just because I work for Findmypast is insane. Most of my connections, if I don't work with them at the moment, they're all just random genealogists that have come up on a suggestion after they've added Jen or something like that. So
there's so much value in just talking to each other, and the internet gives us the opportunity to do that, right? Like I know so many people across the UK, and I think that's tremendous because they've shared information with me, and I've been able to share with them. And this is perfect. Karen, she's serious about networking. Karen would know because Karen has done research for us on the Was Justice Served podcast. So thank you, Karen, because I am serious about networking.
It's how you made it here today. So yeah,
it's right.
It's been a good session. As I say, it was obviously about being a family historian, but I think there's so much advice in there for anyone who wants to start their own business, who has a hobby and wants to take it professionally. Like I say, so much of what you've said applies across the board. So I'm sure plenty of people have found that helpful. Jan saying she can't see the link, but it did go to Facebook.
Yeah. Let's see. It's this one, Jan. It's from the Findmypast account because that's how it's not from me, Jen Baldwin.
Yeah. But if you search Jen Baldwin, or if you have any issues, drop us a message, Jen, and I can send you the link over directly. And if you want to hear more from Jen, we've done enough plugging on Jen, so I'm just going to get one final plug for myself and right at the death here. If you do want to hear more from Jen, we are working on some things to get Jen involved in the Family History Forum by Findmypast. Let me just pop a link for the second or third time today. I'm sure most of you are in here anyway, but I'll pop it in the comments there. As I say, I am slowly teasing out more and more of Jen's time. I got her to do two research tasks. I got her to do this. And look, I'm on holiday for the next 2 weeks or so she's got 2 weeks
I get a little bit of break from Liam.
Get any other nonsense work done, and then I'll come back, and then we can get going on
Remembrance the forum. Is so it's like it's fine.
Happens every year. Do you know what I mean? It's the same every year. The forum is where it's at. So you've got 2 weeks for remembrance, and then we'll get you stuck into the forum. So we get more expert advice, more tips from Jen and some of Jen's colleagues as well. I managed to pull the arm of a couple of people in the team as well, so keep an eye on there. But Jen, thank you very much indeed for joining me on this hot and dry / hot and humid Friday morning / afternoon. Thank you, everyone. I know the weather is insane. You've got Wimbledon on in the background. There's a lot going on at the moment, so always appreciate you taking the time out of your Friday to spend it with us. Jen will be back in 2 weeks, I believe. It will be back over to you. So stay tuned. 2 weeks time, Jen will be back. I won't be here. I might be watching from a plane. If you see me in the comments, I'll let you know what weird and wacky place I'm watching from because I'm obligated to do so now. But yeah, thank you all very much for joining. Thank Jen again for her time, and we'll speak to you all very soon.